Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. Welcome in the post-Easter phase. Let me just do the usual sound check. Just a moment. Let's wait for it to load on YouTube. I've so much to tell you today. Hang on. Okay, that sounds good. It sounds like you guys can hear me. Hi, everybody. So I'm sorry about the long break. As you can hear, I'm still suffering from a cold. Well, it's not really a cold because I didn't have a runny nose. I didn't have a throat ache. I just had laryngitis. So this suspicion creeps up on me that I was actually hit by a bioweapon because for a week I didn't have a voice, like nothing. I couldn't speak for a week. And this happened, well, it really, kicked off when I gave a very long interview to a German alternative news channel. And the interview, they wanted to record 3 parts. So in the end, I ended up talking for 6 hours, which, when people know me, they know that's not a problem for me. But this time, my voice was just gone. It was almost like the cartel tried to silence me, at least for a week. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. My voice is kind of back to functional, even though it's not, perfect. But anyway, so this is what happened. That was one type of abuse that I would like to document. If anybody experienced something similar, please write it in your court case, because I would need your testimony to back up that this might actually be a targeted weapon, causing laryngitis or just the loss of voice. And heck knows what else they might be doing, might be putting stuff into our throats where they can just remote control all this sort of stuff, because we know that they like to put biosensors next to the vocal cords to record subvocal speech and stuff like that. So it's not far-fetched at all. But anyway, the bottom line is I'm back, and I also would like to thank you for your donations. I took the liberty to use them actually for 3 nights to get myself a hotel over Easter. And I actually went on a break. Well, to be honest, I actually fled my home on Thursday because the attacks were so severe. But then I just drove to Germany, and it was so beautiful. I just couldn't face coming back and crawling under shielding. So I just, stayed at the hotel that I got last minute. And for 3 nights, I actually slept throughout the night, which was amazing. I wasn't tortured awake. I wasn't gunned awake. And that was my Easter break. And thank you guys. Thank you so much. Because if you hadn't donated, I couldn't have been away. And I got lots of work done because it was beautiful weather. And I can really recommend the Lake Constance region, which is not so far from where I'm now. And so what I did is I just tracked along the north coast of Lake Constance, just taking my car and just driving on the next day and just getting a random hotel in the evening. And the amount of work and thinking time I got done was amazing. So I'm back after Easter, refreshed, my voice still recovering, but full of energy. So I will prove to you that your donation money was well invested in getting me that rest. And I would like to present all the stuff that I got done and more stuff that I will do, okay? But one of the things I would like to also document, and if you have suffered something similar, please write it in your affidavit. I am not wearing any makeup today, which you can probably tell because I look shit. But I did that on purpose, even though it's kind of humiliating and really hard to do, because I wanted to show you that what they are doing with me now is literally branding me. And I'm not sure if you can see this triangle on my forehead here. So it started off as a half circle, like here, that they literally burnt into my forehead because they're always hitting me with a microwave beam. Literally this size. Sorry, I'm not doing the 666 sign. I'm actually showing you the beam size. And for a long time, you could see a half circle here, because they would be hitting the beam, when I'm driving my car, especially on the motorway. A microwave beam would be literally cooking my head and causing an absolutely agonizing headache within just a very short amount of time. But they kept cooking my head every single time I drove on the motorway. So with time, it led to pigment damage. But then what they started doing is they started sculpting this half circle into a pyramid. They're literally trying to burn a pyramid into my forehead. And one of the things that you might be able to just see here is this, maybe without the shadow, it's better here, like a straight line going down that actually consisted of many, 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 many little shots, or rather pencil beams, cooking my tissue, leading to permanent pigment damage. And you can see one line down here, and you can see another line going down there. I'm sorry, it's disgusting, but this is documenting, crimes against humanity. You can literally see this line, and I can just put a ruler right on top, and it's a straight line. The only way to burn a straight line like that into somebody's forehead is by using lasers hooked up to, remote control technology. That would be correcting for things like the vibration in my car and stuff like that. And it's very easy to do if you can actually pinpoint chips that I have on my head, in my ears, elsewhere on my face. And you can use those to calibrate the beam. And you can do, fast beam correction. There's something, oh God, I forget the name. It was called adaptive optics, and it had a fancier name in astronomy, whereby you would correct for the variation in the atmosphere. So things like, heat variations in the clouds and water vapor, which would lead to, when you're making an astronomical image, a recording of stars, it would lead to kind of smearing out and all sorts of aberrations in your image. But if you just, sent up a laser and use the laser dot that you're making in the atmosphere to correct the image, you could use fancy lens technology to always create a perfect image that corrected for atmospheric variation. Now, the fast control technology for that sort of stuff is already decades old. It was already developed for astronomy and other stuff. And so therefore, it's very easy for me to understand how they developed weapons technology with adaptive optics. And they can literally burn a perfect straight line into my forehead as I'm driving my car. But needless to say that when you're driving your car on the motorway, you are absolutely helpless. Okay, so when I started feeling this burning sensation, I would just pull off onto the emergency lane and take a break when I could. But then as soon as I came back up, another car would overtake me, get in front of me, and continue doing the same thing. Okay, so with this weapons technology that the intelligence agencies and the militaries are using on their own civilian population, you are helpless. It is physically impossible to protect yourself from targeted mutilation. It's physically impossible to protect you and your family when you're in a car, because the windshield is glass or plasticky kind of, safety glass. And it just lets through microwaves at 100% intensity, pretty much. I think you might get a 2% reduction in intensity, but it's essentially transparent to microwaves. So you are helpless. And they particularly like to carve stuff and brand my face, when I'm driving on the motorway, because you can get in front of you, so they can get in front of you with a car, and there's no way you can go, right? You will be stably behind that car for maybe hours on end as you're driving. So this stuff, okay, guys, I want you to have a good look. I can prove that I can't actually rub this off, okay? So I haven't drawn this on. And over the coming months, you will be able to compare the videos I'm making, because this stuff is permanent pigment damage. So you will probably see this triangle on my forehead. And you also know that in cartel signaling, the triangle or the pyramid is one of the crime cartel's recognition symbols. So pretty much, kind of proves that I'm being mutilated by the crime cartel using the intelligence agencies, using modern weapons technology, So, okay, serves me well for court, because the evidence is literally imprinted on my frickin' forehead. A judge would be literally staring right at the evidence in my fucking face. Okay, so, all right. It's not particularly pleasant, right? And it's very humiliating as a woman to do this, to kind of reveal the mutilation. But I actually insist on doing it, not because I'm an exhibitionist, but so that we have, it's kind of like a marker for evidence. It's like there's a public record that's the kind of shit that German and Swiss intel are doing, and British intel elsewhere, right? And I also know from victims in America that they are doing exactly the same to victims in America. There's, for example, also the photograph that Karen Melton Stewart recorded if you are searching for articles that she has written or interviews with her, you will often see this image that she took of the car in her neighborhood, where you can see the car appear 3 times because her iPhone's readout was actually disrupted by the microwave radiation. So it couldn't record the image. And that is typical. She has several of these images, and other people sent me similar images showing lines running across the a little, digital camera if they're being hit with microwaves. So that is all valid evidence, and it's pretty easy to understand why a digital readout system might be disturbed, if there's microwaves. So we can probably, if you work a bit harder, and figure out what type of hardware is in these Apple phones, we can probably even work out what frequency that they were using to stage the assault. But anyway, we don't have time to get into these fancy research projects, and we also don't need to, because we know who is doing it. We also know pretty much what kind of contractors they're using, what type of weapons technology. For example, maybe let me bring up, as a reminder for those people who are new, let me bring up the website of Dr. Reinhard Munzert, a German victim, and I think he was a researcher in psychology. So he was an academic, but he has the website called mikrowellenterror.de. So for those in Germany, mikrowellenterror.de, or in English, mikrowellenterror.de. Okay, you can go there. Let me show the site, because he has one very good article that he has translated into English, and it's really, I think it's worth your time downloading that. Okay, so this is, I hope you can see this, mikrowellenterror.de, and the starting page will look like this, and you can click here for English, okay, and then you will read a very good article here with a link to further information down below. Okay, now if you want to get to the image I want to show you, probably will have to go back to the front page and then go down to something called Bildergalerie, which is picture gallery in German. Click on that, and here are very good images that you can download and use for your court file or for your neighborhood information campaign. I use this image, for example. But what's interesting, and that's what I want to show you down here, is this German weapons company called Diehl that actually fused with Rheinmetall, okay, 2 big German arms manufacturers, specifically to sell and to manufacture and sell high-power microwave systems. Okay, and under general types of applications, they are, advertising a suitcase with a microwave weapon, and they are pointing at how you can put these into tanks, but also little cars. Okay, so here they show a van. Okay, down here, this ad shows a van with microwave weapons in the back hitting a car. Okay, of course, this is sold as car stopping technology, right? Because you can use these electromagnetic weapons to knock out the electronic system in a car. I think typically going through the front vent, because that's not metal, okay? So you can just hit this whole thing from there. But also with exactly the same technology, you can hit the driver. And in fact, in many cases, you will hit the driver. So you can stop the car by knocking out its electronics, which is the version that they advertise, or you can stop the car by just killing the driver or knocking him unconscious, or taking over his neurological processes and making his muscles cramp up around the steering wheel and steer right or still steer left into the barrier. These are all these fancy things that you can do. And also, you don't even need a van to mount a direct LNG weapon. In fact, you can put it into any normal car, even a small car, and you can have the same effect. You can also radiate out of the back by having, instead of having metal, right, you can have carbon fiber that looks like metal and would be spray painted like metal, but would be transparent to microwaves at the back. Okay, so I want you to have this image in your head that that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And we already know and can have an educated guess that Diehl and Rheinmetall would be building the weapon systems that German intel is using to, brandish a little pyramid into my forehead. And probably also the Swiss would be using Diehl and Rheinmetall, or perhaps an equivalent company. Okay. Now, what that means for you is that if you're being microwaved like me when you're driving your car, you end up with stonking headaches. Okay. Because, it depends on the frequency. They can burn you, but they can also just cook your brain without it burning the skin. It very much depends on, how they are firing these weapons, what frequencies and waveforms they're using. Okay. So you can also go straight through the skin and cook the brain, right? But what this means to you is that if you have been shot, you first of all have you have your respondents or defendants for your court case being the intelligence agencies, but you can also queue up these military contractors. Okay. And, you can just charge them in court. And if they say, well, no, it's not our weapon systems, well, the intel agencies can tell us which particular contractor they use to pull off these wonderful feats of, brandishing women, with pyramids on their forehead as they're driving on the motorway. Okay. Now on my face, you can also see like how they're trying to hit my nose. They were trying to like carve straight lines into my nose. Here, they just literally cook the tissue, and you will see white marks where they use pencil beams to burn the tissue such that the flesh is actually burned and it's not even producing any pigments anymore. So here you can literally see the size of a pencil beam burned into my cheeks. Okay. And this was done to me just the last couple of weeks and months, and I think the last year, like the really intense burning of my face started when I fled to Hungary to finish off the affidavit template. Okay, now the affidavit template is something you all should be filling out if you're victim. You don't have to send the filled out affidavit to me, but if you did, I would publish it anonymously. I would use it for my court case to back up my own case. But you can also just keep it private, use it for your own court case if you don't trust me. That's okay. But you can also download all the affidavits that other victims have, sent me, and were fine with having them, having it published. And you can use those affidavits to back up your own private case. That's okay too, right? I am not a data harvester. I don't need your data particularly, but what I really need is have these crimes shut down, because look at me, look at what they're doing to me, and they are doing stuff like this also to my family. Okay, so I want to shut down. But anyway, so let me just show you that as well. Let me take you to my website, and I apologize to all those people who have heard this a million times because they're following me every week, but we keep getting new and new people, and I want them all to be on board. So just very briefly, if you are a victim, go to my website called stop007.org, okay? And you can use these two links. The first one here under news will take you to the affidavit template that you can fill out and then either send it to me or not send it to me, right? That's the first link. So when you click on it, that's where you get. You'll have an introductory video by me. Here is the affidavit form in PDF, but you have to scroll down. You have to install OpenOffice, and which is like Word, but for free. You have to install OpenOffice, and then you have to download the middle file, the OpenOffice format, to fill it out. You will also have the explanatory notes here, which is a document signed by me certifying how I would use your affidavit should you decide to send it to me. But as I said, you don't have to send it to me. But even if you don't send it to me, please fill it out, because as soon as you filled it out, you can show to a judge that many, many people are reporting the same thing. And you can do that by clicking on the second link, which is the first victim affidavits that have been submitted. And you can scroll down to here, and you can download all these victim affidavits that have been sent in. Most of them are from the US, okay, which is not surprising because the US has 327 million people. But or even more, I don't know the exact number, but more than 300 million people. But most strikingly, virtually all affidavits are from the Five Eyes and from Belgium, which is the headquarters of NATO. So it pretty much traces out, who is doing this, which is the Five Eyes, Okay. And I just want to say, if you want to use these affidavits, download these documents and download my confirmation here, again signed, that every affidavit downloaded from this website came with photo ID and with a signed and witnessed statement of truth. Now, the photo ID and signed and witnessed statement of truth, I cannot upload because I want to protect the privacy of the victims. I will use it, and I have to use it for my court case if I use these affidavits as supporting evidence, but then it will only be shown to a judge, right? And by the way, the intelligence agencies, they already know who the fuck you are because, hey, they are targeting you. So they will already know your photo ID, right? So forget about those. But the judge will be shown this to prove that the affidavits I'm submitting are from real people, okay, who have actually put their mug to it, their photo ID to it, and their witness signature to whatever they are testifying to in the affidavit, okay? So this is the best I can do under the circumstances. So if you want to use those affidavits, download my confirmation and then download all the anonymous affidavits. And if anybody doubts your word, you know, if a judge should doubt that this is really valid, well, you know, they can, you can send them to me, right? They can contact me, and then I can testify that all those affidavits are indeed, you know, valid. So there we are. That's the best thing I could do. So this is how to fight back. But please, when this sort of shit is being done to you, photograph it. If you know, have the courage, please come forward. Please testify. Please tell all your family and friends, because we are now past the point of no return. There's no way to cover this shit up ever again. So we are moving every day to more and more and more disclosure. And by now, nobody can smear you as paranoid or delusional or schizophrenic or mad, because there's just too much evidence and too many experts who have already testified and will continue testifying. Okay, me included. So, you know, don't be shy. You should have more and more courage going forward, because the cat is out of the bag. And if you actually stand up to testify about this, you will be on the winning side, okay? And the reason why I'm 100% sure that this is the winning side, even though the intelligence agencies continue brandishing pyramids into my forehead and I'm helpless, is because I know the mathematics of the underlying system. So when you're going towards a networked society of high information or high velocity of information exchange, it is physically impossible to keep secrets for any meaningful length of time, right? And that's because the only way to keep secrets is if you keep killing people. But the more people you kill, I mean, this is what the intelligence agencies are trying to do, right? So hence this, right? But the more people you do, the more, you know, relatives and friends you notify and you alert about the shit that you're pulling. And the more people get pissed off. And at some point, so at first people are still intimidated, but then, you know, disgruntlement starts growing. And at some point in the system comes the point of no return, where there's so many pissed off people and enough. So you need to have a critical mass of ballsy people who literally don't give a shit. Even if you threaten their lives, even if you threaten to kill their loved ones, they still want to finish you off. I'm one of these people, right? So this is why with me, they tried to kill my father, right? They have permanently damaged the heart of my father, but that doesn't stop me, because I literally want these fucking people executed in lawful military tribunals, and I will not stop until the day that that happens. Fortunately, there are many people like me, right? And we don't intimidate. We have the alpha gene and we cannot be submitted. It is physically fucking impossible, because our genetics tells us that we just need to take down the enemy. So when you have reached this critical mass of enough, you know, alpha people having been pissed off, right? That's the point of no return. That's when basically you have alerted enough leaders in the herd that they all honed in on the enemy and they start moving forward, and they are pulling more and more people in that direction. And before you know it, there will be a stampede mowing these people the fuck down. And I'm very pleased to report that we have passed the point of no return. And I'm still kind of gauging when exactly that happened. And it's kind of like tricky to do that because you have to map the entire system. But it's pretty clear that now we have passed it. And the way to tell is that every day there's more and more disclosure and more people are coming online, and they're not afraid, and they're blowing all this wide open. Okay, so that's how you can tell. Okay, so this is now the big background story. But now today I would like to talk about abusers, the newest abusers who were foolish enough to actually go up against the victims, and they thought that they could get away with it. Now, in this, I would like to start with the personal and go to the ever more public and ever more kind of like large scale. Okay, now the reason why I want to do that is because I want to start with personal examples, so that I can tell you what exactly happened, and then just extrapolate further and further out. Okay, so now talking about abusers, so I've shown you my face. I also showed you what to do about it. You have to write an affidavit, you have to prepare for court, and so on. But as we're all fighting, okay, to blow this wide open, there are repeatedly people who come into our path and basically try to destroy everything that we're working towards, right? They are trying to destroy the fact that we want to protect other people. Oh, by the way, I should do a very quick sound check if you guys can still hear me. That we're working towards, right? Okay, yes, you guys can hear me. That's great. So, all right. Oh, there are over 130 people watching right now. That's really cool, guys. Thank you. That is very, very encouraging. So, all right. So let me make it worth your time. I would like to show you what happened. I also would like to thank all the people who are sending me information over Twitter and over email. I try to look at all the links when I have the time. Sometimes it takes me literally weeks to get back to you, or maybe I can't get back to you. But I really appreciate all this, because that's how how I get to know about a lot of things. So thank you to all, and know that none of this is ever wasted. Even if you don't hear back from me, I can just thank you all collectively through a video. But thank you so much. And also keep doing what you're doing by posting the very pertinent links that you're sending me on, let's say, very popular music videos. Music videos that would be watched by millions of people. If you can sneak in a piece of information, like a very good link or some disclosure about the targeting and the global genocide, people will click on it. Okay. So keep scattering information everywhere, because people will stumble across it. And remember that now we have to work to bring everybody on board. So we have to reach the furthest recesses of society and the internet to inform the people who might not have heard about this. And it's very important. So in a sense, the biggest payoff is by posting links in communities and to groups of people who would be the least likely to hear about this. So in other words, the biggest, payoff in terms of, outreach is if you are mentioning the global genocide and directed energy weapons in your knitting group, say, or, at a parents' meeting, where you say, oh, are you guys not concerned about, having your kids non-consensually implanted? Have you actually checked your kids for non-consensual implants? If you bring a line like that, you can be sure that all the parents will listen up and they will not forget. By the time they're home, they'll be already on their phones looking up information, because if there's one thing that people don't like, others to fuck with, it's their own children. Okay, so that's a very, very effective way of getting people to wake the fuck up. Okay, so anyway, that's what you can do. But now let me show you what really pissed me off. Somebody sent me the link to an article that appeared in the Chicago Sun-Times. All right, and those people who have followed my channel know that the sun is, something that refers back to sun worship, right? Pagan and pharaonic sun worship, but it's also something that appears in the logo of the Jesuits, right? Which, as you know by now, is the military intel enforcement arm of the Vatican crime cartel. And the Jesuits are basically the infrastructure upon which all of our modern intelligence agencies are based. So in other words, I put out this thesis and I'm trying to prove it, with time, accumulating more and more evidence that there's actually no no difference whatsoever between MI6 and the KGB or the FSB as it's now known, or the CIA or German Intel BND or any intel agency on the planet. There's only the one agency, which is, basically the Jesuits having infiltrated more and more intelligence agencies. Now, when you're talking about infiltration, size matters, okay? Size, in fact, is the only thing that matters after money, all right? So because money determines size, how many people you can buy and corrupt, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, it's size, okay? How many infiltrators do you have working for you? When you have reached a certain size that is dominant compared to other intel agencies, you will stay dominant forever. Because if a new intel agency comes along, well, you will just infiltrate them. And you have more personnel, you've got more resources, yada, yada, yada. So it's, the intel agency game leads to a global monopoly by definition. This is just a law of system physics. So, and I'm pretty sure about this conclusion, which is why I'm confidently saying that there's no difference between Chinese intel and the CIA. So any sort of spy wars and cyber warfare you might be hearing about is total and utter bollocks, okay? And you can use the laws of system physics to prove that it's nonsense. Okay, so that's the background. So the Jesuits, the sun logo, and therefore the sun logo will appear everywhere in cartel signaling, the sun, okay? So the sun goes back to the Jesuits, goes back to infiltration and spying on everything around the world, right? And it goes back to pharaonic sun worship. Okay, so when I hear things like the Sun newspaper in Britain, I think, what are the fucking chances? That's what you're calling your mass newspaper, right? With which you really try to reach the masses. You call it the Sun. Okay. Fine, right? Okay. And when I hear something like the Chicago Sun-Times, I'm thinking, okay, I can tell that the Chicago Times was already taken, so maybe you wanted something else, but the Sun-Times, like, really? I mean, you could call it the Chicago Sun or something else. I mean, call it something the fuck else, right? No, but it had to be the Chicago Sun-Times. So the Sun kind of had to be wedged in to the title Chicago Times. So that already tells me that I would bet that your newspaper is infiltrated by the Jesuits, or, otherwise known as the CIA, otherwise known as the FBI, right? So when I read the Chicago Sun-Times, I think, okay, if there's any cartel bullshit coming from that paper, don't be surprised. It says it in the title. Don't be surprised. Nevertheless, it still floored me what these people actually put out. I mean, really, the content didn't floor me so much so as their utter, moronic imbecility of not realizing that they will be riding themselves so deep into the shit by doing that their reader numbers will never ever recover from the shock, right? I mean, if the editor-in-chief of the Chicago Sun-Times would have wanted to tank his paper, like literally want to get rid of all his readers in one fell swoop, that's the article he puts out, literally, and he just did. So it kind of makes me wonder if the editor-in-chief has maybe some sort of insider trader deal going on, if this is floated on the stock market, or else if he's maybe, somehow involved through the back door of having his newspaper taken over soon by somebody else. I don't know. That's the only way I can explain how somebody could just do what he did by publishing this article. So let me show you what was going on. Okay. Let me share my screen and let's check out this article by the Chicago Sun-Times. When I saw this logo up here, right, I almost expected to see a red pentagram, which it's not. It's actually, a hexagram here, but it's not really even the hexagram you expect because the spikes are at the wrong angle. But anyway, yeah. Okay. Fine. I mean, frankly, with this name, just stick a pentagram into the middle, guys, really. So the article read, the title read, are you being tracked, burnt by lasers? Maybe you are a targeted individual. Now, the first thing to note okay, apart from the fact that I've just showed you what it looks like to be burnt by lasers on your forehead, right? And it's actually going on. What you will see, the article starts with a very prominent and large image here on the website. And these, if you read carefully, are people. In this caption, it says, people who claim they're being put under organized surveillance and harassed by shady forces gathered at Daily Plaza to mark International Targeted Individual Awareness Day on August 29th, 2018. Okay, August 29, 2018. Now, the article here was published on the 4th of April, 2019. So the question is, right? And here, by the way, after the image, there is Neil Steinberg or Steinberg, Mr. Steinberg, yeah, from the Sun Times as the name. So that kind of implies he took the image, if I'm not mistaken. But if he's using this image, and if he was aware of this protest, and if he was even there, why the fuck did he wait 8 months to publish this article? Right? What the flying fuck was he waiting for? 8 frickin' months. I mean, if you go there, right, on the 29th of August, I expect you to write the article on the 30th, the latest. Right? But no, there was an 8 months delay. And that already tells you that they were waiting for the right moment. Now, when people are waiting for the right moment, there are only two possibilities. Number one, they don't have the balls to publish this, right? Maybe they are good guys, but they are scared for their loved ones. Okay, right? You can be accused of not having balls, but you can't be accused of being a criminal. Fine. But if you're waiting 8 months and then write a smear piece, which is what happened in this case, you are waiting for the right moment to take people down, right? So when I read the title and saw this image and noted the date, I was thinking, okay, which of these is it going to be in the case of Mr. Steinberg? Okay, Mr. Neil Steinberg. Let's see. But also note that what you can see in this image is prominent pictures of very well-known targets who've been in the community for a long time, showing horrific burns to their chest, to their face, right? Again, facial mutilation is something that the perverts and sexual sadists love in the intelligence agencies and the military. They really love mutilating women in their face, on their breasts, on their genitals. I hear that over and over in all the victim cases I'm dealing with. So anyway, that's what you can see. You can also see that this is an image, you know, with the title, "Where's Law Enforcement?" below it. That gray image shows steam, which kind of, the steam disappeared at, you know, circular patches where directed energy weapons were heating the glass. Okay, so this is one victim claimed that he recorded directed energy weapon assaults from a neighbor, and he saw that when his you know, he was cooking and his flat steamed up, if I remember correctly. Okay. So anyway, so you can see all this, right? Pretty important information, and they're waving real evidence about real evidence, like these kind of burns. They are impossible to deny, and they're also impossible to create by other means. You can't pour, you know, hot water over yourself and actually create these type of burns. When you look at the precise nature of the burns, it does not follow normal, you know, scalding burns and stuff like that, or flame burns. So where the fuck does it come from, that burn? Well, microwave weapons, okay? So anyway, let's go through the article, because blah, blah, blah. I will actually read it. I leave it to you to read it, okay? Because I don't want to waste my time going through this boomph. But one of the things that is striking, really striking, I mean, one of the things I have to say that took me aback is that Ella Free, on whose show I appeared, right, several times, she was called by the journalist, and she apparently said on the phone to this guy, a good portion of people who claim to be targeted individuals are actually mentally ill. Really? I'm not sure what type of targeted individual she is talking to, because the ones that contact me, they are most of the time completely sane. And those people who are, frankly, total nut jobs are typically intel agents pretending to be victims. In my experience, I still have to meet a mentally ill person who managed to dream up a story that perfectly matches the COINTELPRO program combined with classified military technology. Frankly, if a mentally ill person pulls off a hallucination like that, he should win a prize. So no, I can't agree with that. I can confirm, based on my experience of having worked in the field for 2 years flat, that actually all targeted individuals I met were sane, and those people who were nut jobs were intel agents. And typically they flashed cartel signaling at me. And yes, those guys were batshit crazy, but they were intel agents, not targeted individuals. Okay. So that aside, the other thing I would like to point out is that this article quotes prolifically a guy called David LaPorte, a professor of psychology at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And he says things like, people who are paranoid start to latch onto the same kind of delusion. This is not uncommon. When airplanes first started, people started having delusions they were being followed by airplanes. Really? Because I've got victim cases where they prove that they're being followed by helicopters. And yes, indeed, they have continuous flyover over their head with private aircraft. Fuck me, funny he would say that. And then he says, and it's even funnier, he says, the computer has been a huge issue that leaked into paranoid delusions. Every technological advance becomes fodder for paranoid individuals. Really? I'm surprised to hear that, frankly, Dr. LaPorte, because one of the things that I know for a fact, and that technical director of the NSA, William Binney, has confirmed, is that, with the advent of computers came prolific spying by NSA and GCHQ and other members of the Five Eyes. So what if you haven't got a freaking clue about, surveillance and stealth technology, and you basically didn't really disprove the claims of your so-called patients, right? I mean, really, it's so funny that he would mention airplanes and computers, and it's exactly computers and airplanes that are prolifically used in intimidation and spying. All right, whatever. Okay. Right, it gets better than that. It gets better than that. Now, this is a line from the author of this article, who is also putting it on in dollops. So the author of the article, Neil Steinberg, okay, writes, with the president in the state of near hallucinatory grandiosity, spinning wild tales of government conspiracy, and millions of Americans blurring their perception of reality to accommodate him, this outlook seems to be a continuum. Targeted individuals are an outlier, an extreme case of what many suffer. In some ways, they may even be more moderate. Oh, really? So we have Mr. Neil Steinberg diagnosing President Trump. Okay. But he's also diagnosing millions of Americans. Now, I would question Mr. Neil Steinberg if he actually questioned or, analyzed these Americans and their statements. Or is he rather making sweeping statements for his employers? Okay? Because frankly, he doesn't have the evidence to back up any of his claims, which in the case of a journalist amounts to fraud. All right. Okay, the next paragraph starts with Ella Free saying, I don't think it's the government. Heck, really? Well, Miss Ella Free is directly contradicting the former technical director of the NSA, who says that the spying is conducted by the NSA. On Americans, it's conducted by the NSA. So I don't know what got into Miss Ella Free to think that she's better informed than the technical director of the NSA, who actually devised most of the programs being used to spy on us. But okay. Now, this is what really got me, okay? Mr. David LaPorte is quoted as saying, they are well organized because of the internet, talking about targeted individuals. That's part of the problem. It deepens and entrenches what is probably a delusion. And I'm like, probably a delusion? Mr. LaPorte hasn't really featured on the landscape of investigators, as far as I know. So where the fuck does he get his data from? That's my question. Because as far as I can make out, he hasn't looked into any cases at all. Okay. Now, this was such an egregious statement by Dr. LaPorte that even Mr. Steinberg says, note the probably, in inverted commas, in the previous sentence. Yeah, fuck me, note the probably. That's what I would say as well, right? Note the probably. Sometimes the improbable does happen. Stalking is real, though usually by individuals, not shady networks. And then this little, paragraph really got me laughing out loud, because at this point I thought, okay, maybe Mr. Steinberg regained his senses and is so embarrassed having to write total shit that he tries to cover his ass. But then he dives straight back in by claiming that stalking, although real, is usually conducted by individuals, not shady networks. Really? I mean, this goes right against everything I've been saying. The Jesuit network, which incorporates every single intelligence agency on the fucking planet, is the biggest network and the shadiest network. And the amount of stalking they are doing professionally, frankly, dwarfs every single lone perv who is stalking somebody. And, I also doubt that there are any freelance, lonely pervs out there stalking people who haven't already been hired by the Jesuits. Honestly, I think they are already on the payroll, these stalking loners, already long on the payroll of MI6 and MI5 and other intel agencies, because these guys are so useful. If you have a certain kind of voyeuristic, stalky, predilection or predisposition, you are made for MI5. They love you. For you, your job is basically fun. It's like jacking off all day long in the office, right? I mean, the logic just doesn't stack up. And Mr. Steinberg is, using this statement, is ignoring history, the physics of human systems, and common sense. He basically just, sacked himself as a journalist. But okay, fine. Shit like that happens. Now, here is my favorite quote from Dr. LaPorte, right? He says, and this is great, guys, he says, no one's really actually talked to these individuals in a clinical way to establish whether they are nuts. Now, let me read out that sentence again, okay? This comes from I remind you, further up here, this comes from a professor of psychology at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, okay? Okay, so this professor says, no one's really actually talked to these individuals in a clinical way to establish whether they are nuts. Okay. Well, Professor, if you claim that, then how the fuck are you and others diagnosing these individuals? Because you, my friend, are so freaking stupid, you basically shot yourself in the ass by saying that yourself. You just said that you don't have a freaking clue what you're talking about because no one actually looked at these cases. Really? I mean, you're interviewed by a newspaper and then you say that you don't have a clue after giving all these statements and being quoted? That's kind of embarrassing. You basically turn yourself into a freaking laughingstock, you moron. Right? But okay, hey, every professor is, at liberty to turn himself into as big an ass as he wants to in the public eye. So fine. I think that's his human right to fuck himself, fine. He just did. Okay, now, And then he continues, and look at this guy's logic, okay? He says, anybody who has worked in this field for a long period of time, you hear stories of fantastic delusions only to find out it was true. Well, it means that they weren't delusions to start with, right? Okay. And then he says, what they're talking about, meaning targeted individuals, could be true, but it's probably not. Well, how the fuck can you say it's probably not when you never looked into this? Literally. I mean, I could be presented, with I don't know what, as some sort of scientific fact that somebody derived from the experiment. And then I could, as a scientist, say, well, I never looked into it, but you're probably wrong. Really? I mean, you would be a gibbering moron saying something like that. And what's great is that this sentence, as it's quoted here by Neil Steinberg, seems to be following on straight from his own admission that nobody looked at these individuals in a clinical way. I mean, talking about shooting yourself in the ass. All right. So anyway, it goes on and on and on, blithering like that, blah, 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 right? But then what really got me is after all these journalistic and academic cock-ups, right, they have the gall to say, this is Mr. Neil Steinberg, okay, he writes, both classical mental illness and current politics seem to share need for validation from people who feel overlooked, grow lonely enough, and space aliens show up. Really? Really? I mean, in this one sentence, I think he got paid by a keyword. I think the CIA must have paid him by a keyword because he tried to put in, the keyword mental illness, that probably got him a grand. Then current politics and President Trump that he mentioned earlier, that got him a grand. And then, grow lonely, right? The lone wolf keyword of the CIA. He probably got another grand for that. And then space aliens. Really? Really? This is amazing, right? And then this is great, right? So I forgot to read out these last two paragraphs because they really got me. LaPorte, the guy who basically just shot himself in the ass publicly, says, if everything is referring to you, you are special in some way. Yeah, Dr. LaPorte, you certainly are special in some way. You are being targeted by the government, by gangs. Then you look at these folks and ask, why would the government, if it had this sophisticated satellite technology, pick these people? They're not particularly special. Really? Dr. LaPorte, how the hell can you tell that these people aren't special if you haven't analyzed them in a clinical way? What if they were about to develop, I don't know what, cold fusion? What if they are all brilliant people? What if they could have been the next entrepreneurs, literally whooping the ass of the big tech companies, right? How the hell do you know? You don't. You're just talking out of what's called, talking out of one's rear side. But anyway. And then look at this. So Mr. Neil Steinberg finishes off saying, ouch, you see why so many lose their hold on reality. It often stings. I mean, good God, right? Good fucking God, I thought. Here they are. This guy, Mr. Neil Steinberg, right, who photographed this protest in August 2018, is writing this article on the 21st April 2019. This guy, I don't think this fucker got the memo. I honestly feel sorry for him. I think he's out in the backwater of the cartel working for the Sun Times, and he was just some moron they had to get in, and he was the last sad sap who would actually write an attempted hit piece at targeted individuals, not having understood that the entire system has moved past critical mass and his ass will be whooped into eternity for having written something like that. I am so sorry for Mr. Neil Steinberg and Dr. David LaPorte, who were both pulled in, because I think their careers are over. Okay, this is amazing. What both of them did, right, is basically admit that they haven't done any research at all. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about, yet they feel confident to smear victims of serious crimes and, in fact, smear modern-day Holocaust victims, the victims of an ongoing modern genocide. Oh my God. And you're doing that in the modern internet age where this shit that you've just written will stay in the public eye forever and cannot be wiped, not even by the NSA. Oh my God. I feel so sorry for you guys. Okay. This is amazing. But anyway, I did a bit of background research and I have uncovered something quite amusing and quite interesting. Okay. So the first thing I would like to show you is that my way of dealing, oops. Okay. I hope you can still see me. I think the NSA just had a little hissy fit because my screen just went black for a moment. But I hope you guys can see me. I would like to show you what I did, okay? Every single time shit like that happens, I take the journalist and I enter him onto the journalist's hall of shame, okay? The way you find my journalist hall of shame is if you go to the front page, okay? You scroll down to these big images and you scroll down to the thing that used to be called blood on their hands, but these days is called attacks and refusal of assistance, which is essentially having blood on your hands. Okay, so you click here and then you scroll down and here are the, you know, my favorite gallery of people who were trying to destroy my work. Okay, and then you scroll down to here, to the journalist's hall of shame. Okay, now click on here and you will find all the past hit pieces against targeted individuals from Australia, from Canada, US, Germany. Well, Germany actually kept quiet most of the time, but the UK, you know, and Switzerland as well. Okay. So anyway, you will find all these journalists here, and I've just made an entry for Mr. Neil Steinberg. Okay, down here, this is Mr. Neil Steinberg there. And I've mentioned his article. I pointed out all the stuff that, you know, is to be said about him. But, oh, by the way, if you should, you know, disagree with this guy's article, you can find him on Twitter. All right. And you can tweet at this guy. I think his Twitter handle is Neil Steinberg. Okay. Just tell him what you think about his article. But what really struck me, talking about cartel signaling by a guy who clearly works for the crime cartel and is clearly not very bright. What really struck me was the image on his Twitter profile, because what you can see here is what traditionally is called, especially in Venice, a bridge of sighs. Okay, now the bridge of sighs in Venice is connecting a jail to the place where these prisoners would have been executed. And that's why this little walkway is called the Bridge of Sighs in Venice. Okay, you can find the Bridge of Sighs. Now, the reason why I know that is not just because I went to Venice, but also because my alma mater called Hertford College, let me just show you, Hertford College, Oxford, has a Bridge of Sighs. Let me just show you. Yeah, here, this thing. And this is traditionally in Oxford called the Bridge of Sighs. Not because we have a prison and a place to execute people in college, but because it kind of looks a bit similar to the one in Venice. So this is called the Bridge of Sighs, all right? But it's so famous, the Bridge of Sighs, that typically these connecting walkways would be referred to as a Bridge of Sighs. Now, to prove to you that I'm saying the truth, Bridge of Sighs, Venice. This is what the original one looks like, okay? It's actually this one here, this little connector. Not as fancy, right? Not as fancy, but for this reason, these connectors between walkway connectors between buildings are called Bridge of Sighs. And I was just kind of struck by the fact that Neil Steinberg has a Bridge of Sighs as his profile. I mean, he clearly is a cartel insider. He works for the Sun Times, and he just wrote a timed smear piece against targeted individuals, you know, the Holocaust victims, which kind of makes him look like a kind of a Nazi. And then he has the Bridge of Sighs. It's almost like he's getting off on this concept of prisoners being taken to the execution. You know, I mean, maybe the Chicago Times has, is in this building, and that's the most prominent feature, but it is just such an unfortunate coincidence. And it's especially unfortunate given that cartel insiders would be using things like their profile images on social media as cartel signaling, as actually showing their allegiance for those in the know. Okay, so I just want to put it out there, okay, about Mr. Neil Steinberg, because I was really struck by this, okay? But anyway, you can find much more, many more nuggets, which, by the way, are all linked down here in this article, okay? But the other thing I would like to point out about Mr. Neil Steinberg, who wrote this, timed hit piece, is some curious information about him on the Wikipedia page here, okay? The Wikipedia page for Neil Steinberg that identifies him as an American news columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times and an author, right? If you, okay, oh, wow, I've just spotted this. So Steinberg has written for a wide variety of publications, including Esquire, the Washington Post, which is known as the CIA's Washington Post, the New York Times, Sunday Magazine, Rolling Stone, Sports Illustrated, Details, Man's Journal, National Lampoon, and Spy. Oh, God, what coincidence. Fine. Okay, but what I want to point out is his personal life. Because it turns out that in 2015, Mr. Steinberg was charged with domestic battery for slapping his wife as she tried to call 911 to report abuse. Steinberg told the Chicago Tribune that he would be entering alcohol counseling. Okay, so this guy who is smearing targeted individuals as paranoid or somehow lone nuts in society is actually a wife beater who had an alcohol problem. Okay, right? And he wrote, everyone focuses on the slap, and that was the only time I ever hit my wife, says he himself, right, to the Chicago Magazine in 2008. But the big issue was really the drinking. I had been drinking. In November 2005, a judge dismissed the domestic abuse charge after prosecutors told the judge that Steinberg had complied with the court order to enter an alcohol treatment program. Okay. Steinberg subsequently wrote about the arrest in the Sun-Times, writing that while drunk at his home in September, he had slapped his wife. She called the cops. They came, clapped me into handcuffs, and hauled me off to jail. When I asked her later why she had to have me arrested, she said, "Nobody hits me, buddy." I like the woman. She's my kind of woman. Yeah. You fucker going down. You might be a cartel member. It almost looks like she was an even higher cartel member because she got the Masonic cops to arrest a cartel insider. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so Steinberg added that I certainly don't plan to get myself in jail again. I'll do everything I can not to betray the support of the paper. Isn't it funny that he vows not to betray the support of the paper instead of vowing not to betray the support of his wife? I mean, hey, son, you didn't slap the editor-in-chief, you slapped your wife, right? And look here where his allegiance lies, with the fucking paper. This guy is such a bum kisser, it's unbelievable. But anyway, he did say he certainly doesn't want to get himself into jail again. Well, son, if that's the case, don't print fucking lies about Holocaust victims, or else, before you know it, you're in a military tribunal or a civilian tribunal, setting yourself up on the fast track to jail for covering up crimes against humanity. Jeez, I mean, you can't make this shit up, can you? But anyway, so this is about Mr. Neil Steinberg. All right. But what's also very, very interesting is the psychologist who was quoted, Mr. David LaPorte. Now, Mr. David LaPorte can be found here at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, right? And I mean, frankly, looking at his profile image, this guy does look 12 feet under, doesn't he? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, should you disagree with his article, you can email him here. Okay. Here's the email, david.laporte@iup.edu. edu. Okay, there you are. But also you can see this guy, that's this guy here, because he also features in an IUP commercial, you know, as a psychology professor. You can check out the guy. But what was very stunning for me was that Dr. David LaPorte also featured at another hit piece, this time from Canada, written by, I think, Liam Brittan. Yes, Liam Brittan, okay, who, oh, hang on, this thing is still loading. Okay, he wrote, "Organized stalking ads on Vancouver Transit, a mental health concern, experts say." And the expert was Dr. David LaPorte, who now in April confessed he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about because he never actually talked to any targeted individuals. Okay, so this hit piece, right, which appeared in September 2018, actually it appeared, right, on 9/11. Okay, anyway, this hit piece, right, was basically put out hastily after the Vancouver train station showed prominent and very kind of, you know, striking billboards about electronic assaults and organized stalking. So imagine these billboards go up, and Liam Brittan, writing for, you know, what's this, CBC News in Canada, okay, he puts out a smear piece as well. All right. Now, this guy, Liam Brittan, already made it here into my Journalist's Hall of Shame. You can find him here at the top. If you scroll down to Canada, you can find everything about him here. Okay. I didn't comment this at the time quite as extensively, but I think now I should. Now I should, knowing that this guy, Liam Brittan, and Mr. Neil Steinberg are both using David LaPorte. Okay, so you can find, if you search for LaPorte, you can find David LaPorte, a psychology professor at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, right? And a clinical psychologist with 30 years experience, expressing concern that targeted individual movement could make it more difficult to get paranoid people into treatment. Here, no one likes to be told they're crazy, LaPorte said. No one's out there looking for alternative explanations. They're looking for evidence that it's the government using satellites against them. Yeah, exactly. Because that's the only thing that fits the evidence. Evidence like freaking burning across your body that you somehow pick up at night when you're sleeping in your bed, you know? Jeez. Anyway, so David LaPorte is literally this, you know, this dude they roll out if they want to do a smear piece. And what this shows me is that once you have identified these individuals, they keep cropping up everywhere, right? It's the same guys. I think by now there are only just so few, you know, dunces that they can recruit to put themselves up into the firing line. But it's amazing. So anyway, I thought, okay, I'm just going to look into this a bit closer, right? I'm going to look into this. So number one, this is the Chicago Sun-Times. You can find more about them here, right? And you can see how their logo migrated from having a target between Sun and Times and having, you know, red and white, the colors of Switzerland, and the pharaonic colors, right? And then migrating down to this little discrete star. You can check out that. You can also check out this, sorry, what did I want? I actually wanted the university, not the University of Pennsylvania. David LaPorte works for the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. This is not the University of Pennsylvania. This is a separate thing. And what's interesting about the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, this is something I just found out searching. Hang on, let me go back there. Let me go back. Searching for the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, I typed it into Google, and the first thing that came up was this Google preview, but it also showed that the graduation rate is 54%. In other words, 46%, so rounded 50%, rounded every second student drops out. Like, what? I've never heard of a university where every second student drops the fuck out. Really? You've got institutions like that in the US. I mean, that takes some freaking believing. Almost every second university student at the university where David LaPorte works drops out. Okay, let me guess, you're probably not taking the cream off the crop, are you? Okay, fine. But also, what the fuck does it say about the teachers? All right? What the fuck does it say about the teachers? I mean, this just took my breath away. Okay, fine. But then, at the other university, how did I get onto? Because I found a connection to Temple University as well. And I have to remind, I think it was, yes, I remember. So if you go to David LaPorte and you look at his CV, because I'm very interested in where these people hail from, you can see that his PhD is from Temple University in clinical psychology. And the courses he teaches are, for example, a graduate course in clinical neuropsychology. Isn't that curious? Isn't it curious that we have targets being neuro-monitored, and then you have this, guy teaching clinical neuropsychology being rolled out to cover up the crimes? That got me really interested. So I looked up, right, Temple University, Temple, right, as a Knights Templar, I thought, right? So when you look up Temple University, what really got me is that it greets you with nothing is beyond you. Yeah, not even lying. Not even lying is beyond you. Not even utter hapless cluelessness should be beyond you, right? Fine. Anyway, on Wikipedia, it's very interesting because their logo is this Athenian temple, right? This Greek temple with some wreath or something or laurels below it. Temple University. Okay. But anyway, it seems to have been founded by a Baptist minister called Russell Conwell. Yes, he was conning well. Anyway, so here's Temple University, and it raises the question: what kind of graduates is Temple University churning out when you have David LaPorte being a PhD graduate admitting in one sentence he doesn't have a clue of what the fuck he's talking about because nobody clinically analyzed these targets to establish if they are nuts or not, and then continues to pontificate, right? I mean, and you do it publicly in I think the second largest Chicago newspaper. Fine. Okay. Now this entire spiel with this article coming out was so amazing. I immediately tweeted at Neil Steinberg and I congratulated him on having basically won a place in the upcoming court cases for covering crimes, covering up crimes against humanity. But I also wrote a letter to David LaPorte to inform him about what the fuck's actually going on. And this, you can find a little exchange that ensued here because I just published all the emails. And my philosophy is, if you are actively smearing victims, I'm going to publish the correspondence with you. Because as far as I'm concerned, you're potentially a criminal. So, we need to have public light on it. But anyway, so I wrote him a long letter that you can read here, where I just informed him about what's actually going on. And then he wrote a very nice reply back, which was very, very nice. He said, "Dear Dr. Horton, thank you for taking the time to write to me. As with any interview, only part of what I said ever gets in print." Okay, well, if that's the case, and maybe that was the case with Liam Brittan, why the fuck give interviews to these tossers about the same subject you just confessed not knowing anything about? But anyway. So he says, "So while I am concerned that many individuals identified as TIs may be paranoid, I do not know that for a fact." Yeah, well, exactly. Fucking exactly. So I don't know. Shut the fuck up then. Anyway, right? And as I said in the article, we, clinicians, have all encountered individuals who tell fantastic stories that at first blush sound delusional, only to later find out that they are absolutely true. That said, many do turn out to be delusions. Really? Really? Are you sure? Or have you actually been screwed over by the intel agencies who maybe, do hallucinations and voice projections into the implants of victims, and then you classify them as delusions because you don't really know about weapons technology. That's what I was asking myself. But anyway, he says, I try to keep an open mind about all of this. Yeah, your mind is so open, whatever gets in immediately falls out, it seems to me. It is my intention to speak to as many individuals face to face or via Skype or Zoom to inquire further. Well, my friend, but you should have done it before giving expert opinions on this matter, shouldn't you? So he says, I cannot do so until I've received permission by my university's institutional review board. Heck, why the fuck do you need your university's permission to talk to people? If you're a researcher, you research whatever the fuck you're pontificating about. You don't put out expert opinions, so-called, and then you confess you don't have any fucking clue what you're talking about. You then confess you haven't spoken to any of the individuals, and then you smear it on your university's institutional review board. Really? I mean, this just takes the biscuit. He says, I would greatly appreciate contact information about individuals who may be willing to talk with me. Well, you're not getting that from me, son, because frankly, you're either an idiot or you're a cartel insider. So he wants them to answer questions that he has. Yeah, there must be a lot of questions. I also want to hear their story. Why doesn't he go online? I mean, all these stories are on YouTube and Twitter and on websites. But anyway, at the end of the day, I strive to present the most accurate picture that I can. Really? That's baffling. That's really baffling. He says, right now, my view of this has been at a distance. And until I actually meet and talk with TIs, that view is blurry at best. I wouldn't use the word blurry, my friend. I would use the word bullshit. Okay? Because if you're forming a so-called clinical opinion from a distance, and then you confess you haven't actually met or talked to any TIs, your view is not blurry, it's outright bullshit. Okay, so imagine getting an email like that, right? So you can read my response, which was, substantial. But anyway, the intelligence agencies threw a hissy fit and my screen went blank. But anyway, you can read my reply where I was trying to get as much information in as I could possibly do, right? So you can read my email here, and I'm not going to read it out. You can read it for yourself, but it goes on and on and on for almost 2 pages, okay? So a lot of information. But then I also said to him, and then he also replied to that, right? He wrote the following. He said, thanks for sending me this information. Once the semester ends, I will have an opportunity to have a closer look. Now, I have to say, this utterly baffled me. And I, as a former academic, okay, so for those of you who don't know, I was a research fellow at the University of Oxford working for St. John's College, Oxford. But I was also, somebody who taught undergraduates in, say, particle physics and nuclear physics and stuff like that, right, at Hertford College, Oxford. Now, as a former academic who taught undergraduates and had to prepare them for their finals, I think I begin to understand why the Indiana University of Pennsylvania has a dropout rate of almost, 50%. I mean, if your researchers are sent information, or basically, no, if your researchers put out opinions, expert opinions, presenting themselves as knowledgeable in the field, and then have to wait for members of the public to send them information and then say, okay, I'll have a closer look. I mean, if this is how you teach your students, I mean, what the hell does Dr. David LaPorte do? He's teaching his students for finals, putting out his distant view on the subject. And then he says to his students, okay, after your finals, when the semester's over, I'll have time to have a closer look at the material that I just presented about. Fuck me. I mean, that's gonna tank anyone's grades, right? And that's literally the logic that he's presenting to another fucking academic, okay? Because I signed with my PhD, so it's one PhD talking to another PhD, and I'm like, oh my fucking God, I fear for the students at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and I seriously question the credentials of Temple University. Because how the fuck? Oh, it gets me. It fucking gets me. I mean, you know, the academic stuff, it really cuts deep. It makes me angry because I had to work my fucking ass off to teach those students. I had to know that shit off by heart, okay, to be able to teach. And I don't put out any views unless I have very serious reasons to think that something is one way or another. Typically, I can either back it up with evidence, or I've got, you know, strong analysis reasons to conclude something like that. But I don't just blither to some newspaper, you know, and smear real life victims of horrific crimes. So I'm making a big deal out of this, people, and I'm going through the entire details because I want you to start analyzing who the fuck these people are who put this shit out. And I want you to start writing to them. Okay, because now we're past the point of no return and there's no fucking way in the universe to get away with shit like that ever. So this, or the article, my correspondence proving utter imbecility and incompetence is going into my court case to prove that there's actually real life programs out there that, you know, smack off Operation Mockingbird and the CIA, right, and their associates, that are, you know, trying to smear victims. And why now? Why exactly now? I can tell you why now, because now we're preparing the court cases. And these people, you know, throw in a last desperate attempt trying to smear victims in the public eye, hoping that the judges will read the Chicago Sun-Times and be biased and assume that there's a real life academic, you know, who has already diagnosed these people as mostly paranoid or delusional, right? And we have to make it absolutely clear. We have to basically debunk this shit and kind of declutter the minds of these judges who might have possibly had the misfortune of picking up a Chicago Sun-Times or another equivalent, you know, publication, right? We have to declutter their minds, and we have to make it absolutely clear that that shit that they might have read and might remember was total and utter bollocks to start with. Okay? So the way to system judo, what these fuckers are trying to do, right, is to take those articles, make them part of your court bundle, and there should be an ever-increasing section on, you know, public libel by journalists, the libel of real-life Holocaust victims by these journalists. Their name has to appear, their fucking mugshot has to appear, so that if they turn up at any more dinner parties, people know what they've done, right? And most importantly, you have to feature the article so that the judge who maybe read it and maybe remembers the article suddenly gets to that section. He's like, oh shit, I remember reading that article. Now it turns out David LaPorte was talking out of his ass, right? That's kind of a big deal because typically judges don't have much time. They'll be flicking through a newspaper. You know, maybe stuff gets stuck in their mind. This is how brainwash works, right? And then they'll be running around with these misconceptions, and we have to debunk that. We have to undo that. Okay? Big deal, big deal. So anyway, that was one thing. And one thing I want to add is that I had 3, you know, people in my mental crosshairs when this article popped up. Number 1 was Mr. Neil Steinberg, right? Number 2 was Dr. David LaPorte. But number 3 was the editor-in-chief who put out this bullshit. Right? It turns out the editor-in-chief, you can find this guy if you go to the Sunday Times. Let me share my screen and hope the intel agencies don't crash my computer. Okay, so you can go to the Sunday Times and you can search for Contact Us at the bottom of the page. And then if you scroll down, you will find Mr. Chris Fusco as editor-in-chief. If you hover your cursor over the name on the bottom left-hand corner of your browser, the email will come up, which is cfusco@suntimes.com. Please, if you disagree with the article, write to the man. Okay, so I did that. I wrote to the man and I recycled the informational email that I sent to David LaPorte, okay, which is very long indeed and has lots of information. And it also includes a link to Dr. Hildegard Stanninger's book, which I like very much and ever more, called Global Brain Chip and Mesogens. Okay, sorry, the coughing wasn't cartel signaling. It was literally my throat giving up. This book I recommend that everybody buy, not because I have a personal commercial connection to Dr. Hildegard Stallinger, but because that book actually contains real life photographs of a brain chip, of a nasal chip, of the nanotech that you will find in victims' bodies, and the sort of stuff that you might end up finding in your children's bodies. So I really think every parent should get a book just in case, to educate themselves, because this is not just theoretical danger. If your kid was born in the United States after the late 1980s, your kid was born at a time when, apparently, as it turns out, according to my former colleague, Dr. Millicent Black, Ronald Reagan had already signed into law that every American can be chipped at birth. And chipping at birth is not just an RFID chip in the heel or in the neck, it also includes brain chipping. Okay, so you should be more than interested if you have a child that was born after the late 1980s. Okay, you should get a copy of this book just in case. Because if it turns out that, let's say, your kid's neck is emitting at high frequencies, or your kid has an eye implant, well, you will probably need to quote this book when you're going to court to claim a stupendous amount of damages, because your child's body is being degraded by these chips, and it might go stupid or deaf or blind or die. Okay, so you need this book. Anyway, so I put that in. Okay, I put that in for David LaPorte, but I also put that into in my email to Mr. Fusco that I've just sent this evening. This is this is what I wanted to upload for you guys. But in his case, I also put in 2 paragraphs at the end, right? Where I said, furthermore, I would also advise you to check yourself and your family for non-consensual implants, such as RFID implants, and especially, given your journalistic work and the documents you might handle, eye implants. In my experience, journalists and editors tend to be implanted at close to 100% likelihood. Now, this ratio of 100% is basically the upshot from recent scannings I did over the last couple of weeks and months, where I realized, holy fuck, the journalists who contacted me, they were all fucking implanted. And they came from all walks of life and all sorts of countries. So I am really now of the opinion that they will be implanted 100%. And it makes sense because we know that police officers and intel agents are implanted, and soldiers, of course, right? But then you would also want to implant your judges and your journalists, because these are the professions you would have to control in order to pull off mass implanting and the upcoming genocide, right? So I'm fairly confident that Mr. Chris Fusco would have at least 1 chip. Okay, so I told him you can buy a $10 UV torch, and if your pupils and that of your family reflect bright green, so here's an example photos of a victim's eye here, linking my website, you too have been implanted with biosensors that are recording everything you're seeing, including in your bedroom and bathroom. Welcome to the 21st century that has shaped up to be like this, thanks to 3 decades of journalistic cover-up. I mean, you can tell that I really just wanted to kick the guy in the nuts, but because I'm on another continent, I had to use words. But sorry, if you're talking to journalists or to judges, ultimately, this is what it boils down to. For 3 decades, when victims came forward and reported about this, judges and journalists couldn't give a flying fuck, because they thought, ha 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 ha, okay, it's those poor saps over there. Well, fuck them. What a story. The cartel pays me, you know, so much to smear these people, and fuck them. They're probably going to be finished off. Why the hell should I get in, you know, my knickers in a twist? That was the thinking, unfortunately, of many judges and many journalists for 3 decades since this has been going on en masse. Now, it turns out they are all implanted, right? And this is what you have to tell these people. If you want to understand why you have to care, you have to find your own implants in your own good self. Start with the eye implants. They're typically very striking, very easy to see. But then those people who had bright green pupils typically also ended up with, you know, their neck and the back of their head emitting at high frequency. Okay, what coincidence. And those people who didn't have shiny, you know, pupils typically also didn't have high frequency coming out of the back of their head. So, okay, so this is what gives, this is the evidence I'm basing all this on, right? But you guys, you really have to get your head out of your ass. You can pull this stuff, but is it really worth it? Because, I mean, the cartel at the moment still pays you, but they will not be able to pay you once damage claims are rolling in, right? And also, by taking their money, you are also making yourself liable for having aided and abetted the cover-up of crimes against humanity, and you might have partaken in private criminal enterprise, which I believe, you know, drops you right under RICO and under, you know, organized crime legislation around the world. And remember, in the case of crimes against humanity, you can be tried elsewhere, you know. So keep that in mind, guys. Keep that in mind when you're putting out this shit. This is no laughing matter. This is not a fucking joke. You're getting yourself into serious danger. And at this moment now, it's still just me with my croaky voice, you know, howling like a wolf out in the wilderness. But that's just, you know, misleading. I'm not a lone wolf out in the wilderness. I'm the only one howling. The other people are basically creeping up on you, trying to take you the fuck down, you know. So be glad for my howling, if anything. But anyway, so this is what happened with that guy. But I encourage you to please contact Neil Steinberg, you know, contact David LaPorte and contact Chris Fusco and just ask them what the precise fuck they were thinking when they put out that article. You know, I'll be intrigued to know. But anyway, there's more to report. There's more to report. I'm sorry to labor you, but there's a few more things that are super important for you to know. Okay. So let's leave this hit piece. I hope I really ground some pairs of testicles into the dust as I intended to do when I read this article. There's more stuff that I would like to talk about. And it goes back to this website I was my website, it's my shit list, basically. So people who end up on my shit list, and if somebody else ended up on my shit list and, you know, really should have won a prize. So let me share my oh, by the way, before I share my screen, let me check that you guys are still there somewhere. Where are you guys? Are you guys still there? Somebody said, damn, I love this woman. That's so kind of you to say. Okay, it sounds like you guys can still hear me. And oh my God, this is a total record. Apparently there are 184 people watching right now. Thank you, guys. I think this is the highest I've seen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so yes, and somebody says drink some water. Yes, thank you, you're right. Tea. Okay, so let's get going. Now, somebody says, oh, by the way, somebody said, how's Wednesday? Wednesday is great, and Wednesday Kennedy is great. And actually this weekend, the weekend before her court case on Tuesday, we will have a big interview with her. So prepare for that. Wednesday Kennedy, who is fighting elderly trafficking in Sydney in Australia, she needs your support. If you're in Sydney next week on Tuesday, you should make it to the court, to her court case as a public observer. Please, she needs your support, okay? But more on that this weekend. And by the way, I also would like to tell you that tomorrow on Thursday, I shall publish the interview. Sorry, my voice is going. I shall publish the interview of Professor James Fetzer about false flags. And false flags are super topical about the newest false flag, you know, the burning down of Notre Dame, which seems to have been done with direct energy weapons. Okay, so that is on Patreon. That's right. And so the Patreon site, if you go to Patreon, let me just share. Sorry, I have to plug my site because I'm trying to crowdfund, you know, court cases, which will, and also I'm crowdfunding basically the fact that I work for free for those victims who cannot afford, you know, paying for my help, which is most people actually. So anyway. Here you can see my Patreon page, so patreon.com/stop007. Please become a patron. And I adopted the policy that for $5 per month, you get access to everything, you know, everything. If you are not a victim who has been asset stripped, please consider supporting me with more than that. You know, maybe $10 per month, because the $5 per month is basically the price of 2 coffees per month, okay? If you can stretch to that, which most people can, you know, you can enter this website. But remember that you're just not just paying me, you're also investing in court cases being fought. You're investing in me supporting court cases with all my knowledge as an expert witness, as a physicist, as an investigator. So by investing in me, you are basically channeling money to a lot of causes that need to be fought right now. So please, 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 I'm trying to get, you know, the number of patrons up above 200, you know, hopefully, and then maybe I can reach 250. That would be mind-blowing. But please sign up, and the interview with James Fetzer will be published on Patreon, okay, tomorrow. And I'm trying to put some interviews out there on Patreon to entice people to join. But, you know, it's stuff that's truly important, like what I'm saying now, like important for from many aspects, I will continue putting out for free, you know. But please support me. Please be honest enough. And please, 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 please remember that, you know, if you want to fight evil stuff like 5G and directed energy weapons and biowarfare and implants, you have to fight it at the battle line. By the time it gets into your home, it's too late. By the time you have already implants, it's too late, in a sense, you know? So if you want to avert that, if you want to protect your family, please invest in fighters like me who are on the front line, because by supporting the front line, that, you know, that's hopefully away from your home and your family at this point in time, that's how you really fight against the enemy, you know? Okay, but enough of plugging my own site here. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and again, this is now very personal, okay, but I'm talking about it because I don't just want to expose what happened to me and the people around me, other activists around me. I want to expose a method, and I want to show you how you can fight back. What sort of dirty tricks they will try to pull on you, and how you can fight back, maybe in your business, maybe in your activism, wherever you are, okay? I found that the tricks are always the same. So if we find a way to just debunk shit and we're not scared, we can transfer these insights into any aspect of our lives. Okay, so to follow me, please go to my website, stop007.org, and then scroll down. And there you will find the documents I shall be talking about. So scroll down again to this attacks and refusal of assistance. This is this, you know, big red blob, which is paint, by the way. It's not blood, it's paint. But anyway, click on that. And I would like to present a new entry here in my Hall of Shame, which is Erika Meyer, this lady down here on the right. Now, Erika Meyer, I strongly am of the opinion, based on what I've seen her do, that she is actually an agent. Okay, now the name Erika Meyer is very German, which kind of pushes the conclusion on me that she might be working for German intel, maybe stationed out in the US, who knows. But she has been literally acting like a top infiltrator and saboteur. Okay, now what she did is that she actually, the contact with her, and this is all laid out in the index, okay? So she initially contacted me in 2017, and it was very innocuous at first. She presented herself to be a victim. But now, looking back in retrospect, with hindsight, I actually recognize what I consider to be cartel signaling already in her early emails. And I wonder how many victims who were basically screwed over by agents could go back and look at early emails and see cartel signaling, okay? So keep this in mind and try to look for similar signs. Maybe you will have observed something similar. And then also another pattern that I observed is that she pretended to actually use my help. She pretended to actually engage. She published a bug detector scan of herself out in the forest that was very high quality, very well done. And it kind of gave me this impression that she's genuinely a victim. But nevertheless, what happened is that, timed with the breakup of the Techno Forum in August, 2 weeks after that, she literally started defaming my former colleagues, okay? And she basically contacted me, and I've documented everything. And you can see this long list of defamation. I mean, you know, all victims have suspicions about who they might considered to be an infiltrator or a limited hangout and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, considering that and talking about that is actually okay in my view. It is part of learning how this entire community was subverted. And it's important that we go through this exercise because, yes, there are real life infiltrators. But what I just noticed is that in her case, she would do it very timed, trying to drive a wedge between, you know, former team members and myself. And then a flare starting on the last day of February, and then just continued for weeks all the way into April, where she would systematically smear people one after the other, and every single case would have no evidence to back up what she was saying. And she would keep going. And that's the moment after this long list of defamation where I actually decided, well, you know what, girl, based on your behavior, if you're not an agent, you really should be, because you're doing exactly what the BND and the CIA would want you to do. You can earn serious money with what you're doing anyway, right? So anyway, I want to go through this, right? Because I want to show you first. You can read all this in detail here, and you can read it all the emails. But you know, I was contacted by her very innocuously on the 22nd of March 2017 for the first time. But then in her emails, the sign up, she would just include really weird, sign-offs, not sign-ups, signs off in May. So just a few weeks after contacting me, she would, for example, sign her email showing this hand sign. Now, this is considered to be the peace symbol by most people, okay? But actually, this is an insider symbol representing the double pillars of Freemasonry and representing the Templar V, okay? It was the South African historian Sean Ross who educated me about the Templar V, okay, and its importance in cartel signaling. Okay, so that sign goes back to the Knights Templars and so on. So I have to tell you guys, the peace sign was a CIA psyop, and it actually got everybody to show the sign of the cartel, right? Similarly, Winston Churchill showing that the V sign, it wasn't for victory. Well, it wasn't actually the victory of the real people. It might have been the victory of the Masonic crime cartel that staged the Second World War, right? So that sign is actually cartel signaling. But honestly, back in May 2017, I didn't pick up on this. I thought, yeah, she probably means peace. I just found it odd that the woman would be putting in little symbols, you know, into an otherwise just normal email. But anyway, the next email on the 7th of May, she would sign off as Heidekraut and show a little white rabbit. Now, why the fuck would you call yourself Heidekraut? You know, that's a German word, and it means kind of heathen herb, right? Heide is heathen, as in or heath, or whatever you call it in English, you know. It has this double meaning, and Kraut means either herb, but it's also a derogatory name for German. So it's almost like heathen German, you know? But then a white rabbit. Now, the white rabbit is the cartel symbol for somebody who lures, you know, a victim into the rabbit warren of the cartel. It's prominently used in Alice in Wonderland, you know, the white rabbit luring Alice in to this, you know, world. So she literally signaled, in my view, that she's not who she's making out to be, and then used the symbol of the white rabbit. Now, the next section shows exactly this video she recorded, right, where she was pretending like, oh yeah, she's really engaging. She put out a video showing that she too is implanted. By the way, both victims and intel agents are implanted, okay? So any intel agent could do what she does and say, look, I'm a victim, because we implanted in exactly the same way. But anyway, that was in 2017. And then, you know, almost a year and a half later, she started smearing Ramola and Karen 2 weeks after the breakup of Techno. Okay, so you can read here what she wrote about Ramola, but with every single person, she was trying to be as insulting as she can be. And then she was also trying to pass it off as if she would have some insider knowledge, right? Here, for example, she said about Ramola back in August 2018, my intelligence is good. And then she put in a wink. By the way, the wink, this wink, is actually the cartel symbol for the all-seeing eye. So it might not be what you think it is, right? So if it's a normal person, the wink means just a kind of tongue-in-cheek joke. But if you're a cartel insider, that you kind of are signaling that you're an intel agent, basically. So when she says my intelligence is good, with everything that has passed since then, in hindsight, I look at this and I'm like, fucking hell, she was telling me she's an agent, you know? But anyway, I wouldn't have known this shit, guys, if I hadn't seen a lot of agents and their bullshit. Now, what I mean by bullshit is that in the beginning, you will see how for months on end, Erika Meyer was trying to smear Karen and Ramola and other people, pretending she's on my side. However, as soon as this became wilder and wilder. And at some point, when she went through the list, and I was thinking, okay, this is enough now, right? By the time she reached Dr. Millicent Black and was claiming that Dr. Millicent Black doesn't have a PhD, that's when I cracked. And I said, this is absolutely not true. You cannot say that Millicent ever lied. Millicent is not the person to lie. Of course she has a PhD. She is a doctor of ministry. She told me, I think she even sent me documents. I remember that. And that is completely beyond a shadow of a doubt. So that's the moment when I cracked. Up until then, I didn't engage in all this shit. I was thinking, I'm just going to ignore it, let it run dry. Maybe it's just a real victim having a paranoid phase where you're questioning everything, which would be okay. But when I saw the pattern and how it was just getting thicker and thicker, right? You can see it here at the dates. I cracked with Millicent and I actually publicly said, no, you can't say that. And by the way, you can't say this about Karen because she had just smeared Karen days earlier. Okay. And that's when I started being smeared. Okay. So you can see the entire list, but I would like to draw your attention to the dates. So the whole thing started, as far as I know, these are the people she smeared first to me, in August 2018 with Ramola and Karen, shortly after the breakup, clearly trying to drive a wedge, right? Because 2 weeks after the breakup, perhaps the whole thing could have healed. Well, it didn't, right? But she did her bit, or at least tried to on my side, unsuccessfully. But who knows what else she done. Then on the 28th of February 2019, that's when the campaign started. And look at this list, right? So she smeared Fighting Monarch on the 20th of January, and that's public tweets, and I included them down below. Then Richard Lighthouse on the 28th of February. So there's almost a month, or there's over a month, right? A month and a week between these two. But then there's only a few days, and she smears Robert Duncan. Then 2 weeks pass, and then she has a flurry of smearing Ramola, Karen, Melanie Richan, the username called Intergalactic, and then Winnie, whose surname I'm very sorry I will not pronounce because I'll probably screw it up and insult her. So I should just call her Winnie from for now. But all these people here were smeared on the 16th of March. 6 people in one big go, right? Then she smeared Dr. Millicent Black, and I forgot to include the date, but it was exactly in this phase here, I think after the 16th of March. And then, oh, by the way, also she smeared Dr. Paul Marco posthumously, right? Meaning after his death, right? And then what really got me is that she first sent me in an email this obituary by a guy called Paul F. Marco, who just happened to have died roughly around the same time as, our Dr. Paul Marco. But this guy died in the US, and our Dr. Paul Marco died in Ecuador. I mean, fucking hell, right? And the two people don't even look the same. So anyway, she sent me this. This is our Dr. Paul Marco, or was, right? And this is the other Dr. Paul Marco. The two do not look the same at all. Here. So one guy had short hair and appeared with short hair shortly before his death. The other one is shown here with long hair. I mean, what? Really, really. I mean, what the hell? Okay. And then also she doubted that our Paul Marco had a PhD, and I sent her a link to a book that he published along with others where he's quoted with a PhD. And it even says that Paul W. Marco, our Dr. Paul Marco, had a PhD in psychology from Saybrook Graduate School, right, and Research Center. Now I sent all this information to Erika Meyer, and she ignored it and continued slandering Dr. Paul Marco publicly. I mean, it was beyond tasteless, right? And this smearing Dr. Paul Marco and then Millicent Black is what basically blew my top. But as soon as I defended these people, I ended up on her shit list, and then she started defaming me, and then also, you know, other people after that, right? And then it started, and then she suddenly claimed I didn't have a PhD, blah, 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 blah. And I even sent her the webpage where I published all my documents, including a written and signed paper by St. John's College that I worked for them, documents from CERN that showed that I worked for the physics department, blah, blah, blah. Everywhere I'm addressed as Dr. Katherine Horton. There's even, by the way, if you have any doubt about who the fuck I am, you go to my website, stop007.org. You scroll down. I think at the moment it's right here at the bottom here. Qualifications and work at this blackboard. Okay. You scroll down and you find all the fucking documents. Here's the certification from St. John's College, right? This is a scanned copy with a real signature, right? And then you can scroll down, find the documents from CERN. And then down here, you can find a reference by Professor Elston, who even refers to me having done my PhD at Oxford, right? He was actually one of my colleagues at St. John's College, Oxford. And he himself is a professor at Oxford in the Department of Engineering. And you can read this. You can read the reference, making references to, you know, the details. This guy knew, right, that I had just come from another Oxford college when I joined St. John's College. So you can find everything about me with all the documents, okay? So my PhD is beyond a shadow of a doubt, okay? But nevertheless, right, this is what Erika Meyer doubted. She said 3 members of the techno team claim to possess PhDs. In fact, I don't think a single one of you holds a PhD, right? Otherwise, Catherine, you should provide a graduation date and curriculum vitae. Well, I just did. It's up on my website. Calling Oxford isn't good enough on this. Well, you can call St. John's College. In my opinion, Oxford is 100% complicit. Well, but there's still the documents that they're signed. Okay, but then I sent her all the documents, and she continues, and it continues, and it continues. And then what really got me is that she put out a video where she said guilty until proven otherwise. Robert Duncan, Millicent Black, Katherine Horton. Now, guilty until proven otherwise is throwing over centuries of, you know, legal principle. It's innocent until proven guilty, right? And she is basically laughing in your face, right? By writing it down for you. So you can find this, you know, the video that she put out where this appears about phony credentials, smearing Robert Duncan, Millicent, and myself. I don't know anything about Robert Duncan, but I can certainly vouch for Millicent and myself. And we both have doctorates. And we're both entitled to refer to ourselves as doctor. What really I found very funny is that in this video where Erika Meyer is talking about this, you can see the word disinformation underlined in most of the video. It's almost like she was, you know, subtitling her own video as disinformation, which really got me. But anyway, so you can just go on and, you know, read through this entire pile of bullshit if you have a lot of time in your hands. Well, I don't recommend you waste your time, but one of the things that you can do is, should you ever become the victim of targeted defamation, you know, I encourage you to go back there. Okay, sorry, just give me a moment. Look at all this evidence. You can download it as evidence of past examples of people being smeared in series. You can study the methodology. You can also look at how she phrased certain tweets to keep it ambiguous, and how she presented everything that was false as established fact. And at that point, it actually becomes unlawful. It actually becomes character defamation and libel as an actionable, in a violation in court. So anyway, but this, I'm just absolutely amused, because I have now, if you go back to that page where, her defamation is linked, there have now been, waves and waves of people who try to defame me, one after the other. Some pages I've just realized I have to still fill out. I still have to fill out the bit about here, for example, Annie Kaspar, right? But all of these people, Robert Duncan, Brian Tew, Todd Giffen. Robert Duncan said my mind is too average. Yeah, fuck him. Anyway, Brian Tew tried to say that I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist. And then when I proved that I'm a physicist, he tried to claim that I've never worked at CERN, right? And that was a big fat lie. And he cited a scientist, a CERN scientist, but he wasn't willing to name who it was. So that was, for me, smoking gun. Todd Giffen, same story, right? Annie Kaspar, Thomas Fontanes McFarlane, Ramola Darmarich, who engaged in a half-year campaign against me with a bunch of allegations that I still have to debunk. I mean, she put out a 4-hour video together with Melanie Richard that I still have to debunk. But, and now Erika Meyer. But when I look at all of these, you can see a pattern. Once you put them up one after the other, all of them, right, were trying to attack me, either saying that I was lying, either saying that I was trying to harm victims, either saying that I don't have a PhD, that I'm not a scientist, that I lied about my background, that I was never at CERN, I was never at Oxford, this sort of stuff. And you can just take it and debunk it one after the other. So my recommendation to all of you who've been watching this, it's not just about me, it's about the pattern. It's about what these people do and how they try to pull this off. Most of the time, they try to scare you and intimidate you. And we just have to say, no, I'm not going to intimidate. I'm going to take out all the evidence, even though it might take me ages. And I'll put a website up there. I will disprove you. And when I do that, it was a lot of work putting out my CV, and it was a lot of work putting out all the shit, right? From the lying journalists to Erika Meyer and all the other people. But when you put it out there, that is documentation that you can quote in court, and that will be there for posterity, right? All these lies, all this, the entire pattern, which seems to be a template that the CIA has been using for decades, if not centuries, right? Going back to Jesuit intel before the CIA, right? Now it's not working anymore, because first of all, they are revealing the identity of these saboteurs. They are revealing their methods, and they are also showing their hand, showing how desperate they are, trying to take genuine people down who are really working hard and debunking all this stuff, right? In actually exposing crimes, helping victims, and putting information out there to try to have this shut down. So just think about, who the fuck are these people? And how depraved do they have to be to pull something like that? Okay? I mean, for me, they're all a bunch of fucking Nazis. They actually want other people to suffer. They want people to be mutilated with direct energy weapons, to be tortured with chip implants. And they want society to bless them. They want to keep their jobs in newspapers and other places. And they want to continue doing that into eternity. And now the question is, are you going to let them? Are you going to let Mr. Neil Steinberg put out shit like that? Are you going to get Dr. David LaPorte? Sorry, I put it into inverted commas because, I mean, fuck me. Anyway, I couldn't have graduated from Oxford with shit like that, I can tell you. But anyway, are you going to let these guys get away with this? And Chris, Fusco, the editor-in-chief, really? In 2019, are we going to let this shit stand? Or do you maybe have the time to write them an email and say, this shit ain't happening now, right? And the other thing I really want to say to you guys is, have a look at the list of the Hall of Shame of journalists, because The Guardian is there, Private Eye in the UK is there, right? Private Eye seems like such a benign, jokey newspaper, but they are not benign. I personally am convinced that they are actually paying, they are a retirement home for former intelligence agents. You know, I genuinely think that. I genuinely think that the reason why I was in the Private Eye offices, the reason why these secretaries had to get me the fuck out of the door before the meeting upstairs finished might have just been because I might have run into, I don't know, who knows, Sir John Scarlett on the staircase, right? I might have fucking punched a guy in the face, right? Had I known he was in the same fucking building as me. Right? He's probably trained in all sorts of martial arts, but it's anyone's guess who's going to come out top. Head of MI6 for martial arts training, or very pissed off woman, right? I don't know. Clearly, people in the Private Eye offices were not willing to risk, any bets like that in the Private Eye offices. So for some reason, I needed to get, the hell out of the door before the meeting upstairs finished at 5 p.m. So what the fuck was Private Eye hiding? Who were they hiding? And to this day, they haven't reported about the mass genocide and mass maiming of the British people with directed energy weapons and the mass chipping of the population. Big fucking deal, right? And they can't claim ignorance because I told them my own fucking self after the second hearing in the High Court, right? On the 16th of June, 2016. So these journalistic outfits are not benign. So the way you can fight it, if you are a reader, is to stop reading that shit. Stop buying it. Stop buying it. Maybe pick it up, from a tramp out there who using this, to sleep on, and read it for research of what shit these people are putting out there, because they still didn't get the memo that we're past the point of no return, right? But do not spend your money on paying for this stuff, please. I think it's 50p, or last time I checked, it was 50p, 50 pence to buy, I think, the Daily Telegraph or something like that in the UK, or the Guardian or something. I have to check prices, but it's like thereabouts. And people would buy it every freaking day. I mean, are you kidding me? If you're just buying it every work day, do you know how much money you're spending, per month? I mean, if you buy 10 copies in the first 2 weeks, instead of filling your head with shit, for those £5, you could just support me on Patreon and actually help to have this shit shut the fuck down. Okay? So be aware that every penny you spend is a vote. You can vote for shit, and you can vote for the people who fight shit. And I'm not just talking about myself, because there are many other good investigators who have Patreon sites, donate buttons. And, if you're tempted of buying a newspaper, either because you're foolish enough to want to read it, or because you think that's the cheapest option to line your cat litter basket, well, think again and think maybe, you could do something else like blue paper, or, not read stuff. Maybe you could watch stuff for free online or support people on Patreon. Be aware that everything you're doing is a vote. Your money is a vote every single day you spend it, and your monetary votes are much more powerful than, the votes that you're maybe making every 4 years once. So be aware where you're spending your money. Basically, by spending your money, you are shaping our world. The things will happen, or things will happen where money is. So be very careful where you put your money. Be very careful where your trust fund, if you have one, or hedge fund, or, investment fund, or whatever the hell you have, wherever the hell your money is, be very, very careful where that money goes and how it's invested. Because chances are you've probably, if you have an investment portfolio, you will probably have some defense contractors in there, right? Thinking, oh, this is great because this is going to pay for my retirement, because these places have a huge return, because there are all these wars happening around the world. And you were thinking, okay, these wars are always in, killing other people, brown people, far away, and not me, whitey, back here. But that's wrong. The next war that's waging right now is against whiteys in Australia, in the US, in Europe. So what you just did, instead of, lining your nest for your retirement, you just paid for the directed energy weapon that will be put up next to your neighbor when you retire to kill you, so that they don't have to pay you your pension. You know who paid for that? You did. You did, right? So be very careful. Are you paying abusers through your pension fund? Are you paying abusers through your investment portfolio? Because if so, you need to stop right now for two reasons. Number one, it's exactly those people you paid who will kill you, right? Because they don't want to pay you the money back. That's why. They don't want to pay your retirement. They don't want to pay you insurance money should you get sick because you got cancer from these weapons or from 5G, right? They don't want to pay you your money. It's so much cheaper to kill you, right? So they will kill you because they have to make profit, right, for the company you invested in. And, profit is all that mattered for you. Profit is all that matters to them now, right? So number one, they will kill you, right? I forgot number two. Fucking hell, I forgot number two. What was I about to say? I said, you have to remind me, guys. What the fuck was I about to say? I forgot. There are two really good reasons. You should, keep a tab on where your pension fund is going. Number one is because you're going to pay for your own death. Number two, I forgot. I probably have to say it next time. It will come to me in a moment. But anyway, so what the fuck could it be? I think it was a brilliant point, and maybe you guys will never know now. You'll never know. I might have just been pulsed to the head and it escaped me. By the way, did you know that this pulsing to the head, either through the chips or directed energy weapons, it's called narrative disruptors, and it's technology developed by DARPA. If you search for narrative disruptors and DARPA, you will find a news article about this sort of stuff. But anyway, it was about you being killed, well, most likely about your children being killed. You will be chipped, you will pay for this entire chipping technology, but also, I guess you're also taking money away from viable projects and you are funding it into this war industry, right? So you're going to be hit double because number one, you paid for the technology that's going to kill you. Number two, you defunded and you starved all the people who might fight to support you, right? So at some point you have to think, holy shit, we are in the middle of a genocide, and you can count the number of people who are actively fighting against it on maybe the fingers of one hand or two hands at most, right? Very few people have the sort of guts that I have. When even the intelligence agencies fucking carve a pyramid into your forehead, you still think, no, Andrew Parker and Alex Younger, I'm still going to get your balls. I don't care if you're carving the all-seeing eye into my forehead or my brain. I'm still going to get your testicles on a silver platter, administratively, legally speaking, right? But there are very few people who think like that. Most people would shy away. So now, why are we in this situation? It's because everybody else has been defunded. So what you need to do is you need to take your money out of all those investment funds, all those pension funds, and you have to decide. The vote has to go back to you, and you vote for the projects that you're supporting. That is very important. Do not support abusers. Okay? It's very, very important. I think most of you who have pension funds and also investment funds, I should say, you probably leave it to some other people like, yeah, okay, invest it somehow. Just give me my return because I want it for my retirement. I don't really care what you're doing, right? But actually, your money will be used to kill you off so that they will never have to pay you back. That's the logic of this. Okay, so very, very important. Now to finish off, I'm almost done, guys. You can go and enjoy your evening, but I have to tell you one thing that's super important, and this is something that I've just noticed today. Okay, now I'm about to publish, I think it will take a few more weeks to finish, but I will publish how I spent all the donation money, right? Where the fuck did it all go? It's a lot of administrative work and I have to finish it. But when you see that, you will see that I'm paying for Netflix subscription. And you might think, why the fuck is she spending, 10 francs on Netflix? Doesn't she have enough work to do? And the thing is, this is my work, okay? It is my work because I'm studying what the cartel is doing by watching its propaganda, okay? So, for example, when I see a Netflix series like The Purge, well, guess what that is brainwashing people into? Into the genocide. It's actually brainwashing youngsters who are most likely to have the time to watch a lot of TV into thinking it's okay if there's 1 day in the year where you're allowed to kill your neighbors. Because they've seen the concept before. It's all about putting images and concepts into people's heads. So the purge is actually genocide training, right? And by having the probably brain-chipped youngsters watch Netflix, the intel agencies can work out who is maybe having, a rush of endorphins and, in their brain and their body when they're watching people being killed. Well, those people will be then groomed and recruited to be the next round of assassins, okay? It's very scientific these days. It's all based on big data analysis. So when I see stuff like The Purge appearing on Netflix, I'm like, yep, that is genocide training, okay? Now, what the fuck to do about it? Well, what we will do about it is, number one, we will sue the directors and the people who put out The Purge. When it will become clear that there has been a purge in the Western world, well, they will have something to answer. Literally, we will sue them for millions. So any actors, any directors, any people propagating the purge like Netflix, they have massive liabilities. Oh, I remember why. I remember my second really important point about, do you remember about the investment? So I said, you need to pull your money the fuck out of these investment and pension funds that are investing in, in military contractors and stuff like that for two reasons. Number one, they're going to kill you. And now I remember number two. Number two is because as an investor, you will have massive legal liabilities rolling towards you, because all the investors and all the shareholders going back through time, that data is stored by the banks, and by the way, also copied by the NSA and other places, okay? So you can be pulled out as one of the people who have actively invested in the ongoing genocide of your compatriots. In other words, you are in for high treason. You are in for having aided and abetted crimes against humanity. And in the UK, I think it's called terrorist financing. You will have financed real-life terrorists. The real-life terrorists are not people with Middle Eastern names. The real-life terrorists are people with German and English and Swiss names who are running the intelligence agencies, Now, when it turns out that you have been paying in large amounts of quantities these military contractors who have been actively conducting a genocide of Americans and Europeans, together with the terrorists in the intel agencies who are not really under any control of the government, right? You will have become a terrorist financer. So are you willing to risk this? Are you willing to risk that maybe you made it to your retirement, right? Unlike your friends, you didn't get cancer because, let's say, you're a Mason. So you were in the cartel, so that's why they didn't kill you. You made it to retirement, and you are just, hoping to benefit from all the stuff the Masons are going to pay you back in your retirement. But then suddenly it turns out we're past the point of no return. Suddenly all these court cases are rolling in. Suddenly everybody knows, who has financed in this, been financing this, because the bank records will be made public, right, through all these court orders. And you will appear as one of the investors who has been investing in genocide. And it turns out you have been financing the mass murder of all the Americans and Europeans who never made it to retirement because they were slaughtered. That's gonna look really bad. And even your lawyer, whom you will have to hire at that point, will think, that looks really bad, we should go for a plea deal, right? So remember these two things, right? Number one, you will get killed by these military contractors whom you will have paid, right, all these years. Number two, you will have massive liabilities rolling towards you as a terrorist financer. Are you willing to risk it? Are you willing to risk it if you're a hedge fund manager? Are you willing to risk it as a private investor? Are you willing to risk it as a so-called high net worth individual? Well, I'm not a financial advisor, but I will nevertheless advise you to pull your money the fuck out of these businesses, right? Because you have literally no idea how many black swans are flying your way, and they will end up in the turbines of your monetary plane, and you will go, right? So that's what I wanted to say. Okay, now let's finish off, and then I will finally shut the F up, and my vocal cords will rejoice. I would like to finish off with something that Netflix has just put out. And today, in the lunch break, when I logged on to just see, oh, what's the newest cartel produce? Boom! There it was as the main thing being featured. And then I go on Twitter, and boom, there it is being featured by Netflix on their Twitter feed. Okay. Now, let me show you why that's such a big deal. Okay, now let me take you to the IMDb page of this. It's the new, let me share my screen. I hope they don't crash it. Okay, so I am talking about this new series. It's a Netflix original called Bonding. And the first thing I would like to draw your attention to, I hope this is big enough. Let me blow this up so that you can see. The first thing you should note is the way the title is spelled. It's Bonding in all capitals, apart from the I, that's lowercase. Now, when the I is highlighted, you should know that this is cartel signaling for the all-seeing eye, okay? In other words, the cartel has been signaling the stuff for so many years. It's now an insider joke that has gone through many permutations. Everybody knows what's meant. So bonding already has a cartel signaling eye, reference to the all-seeing eye, as in the global crime cartel, okay? Now, I can't play the clip or my YouTube video will be shut down, but what this is basically the advertising of sex work and the sex industry to young people. Okay, now if I may take you to my Twitter page, okay, I can show you, let me go down. I can show you the tweets I sent out because they are actually referencing here. This is the original Netflix advertising. Sorry, I think I have to stop this. Okay, I can't show you the footage. Maybe I can show you stills. What this is about, and by the way, in the background you will see a lot of cartel signaling, but it's about advertising a dominatrix, a sex worker basically. But what is telling is that this tweet was sent with, quick tip, don't watch this with your parents. Now, from that alone, you can tell that this film is targeted at the under 18s, because typically it's only them who would be still at home, not at uni or not somewhere else working, right? So we have a Netflix series about sex work and frankly also sexual perversions, because S&M is not the only thing they go through here. It's also about urination on people, which actually many people don't know are mainstream sexual fetishes, but they are sexual fetishes nonetheless. Now the question is, why would Netflix start targeting under 18s with sex fetishes and sex work? And why would they use young actors who look like they're just about 18 or maybe younger to market this at them? Well, you can find the answer in my tweets. It's basically sex work training, okay? And it's also preparing your children for sex trafficking. When they find that they can't pay their student fees, which I haven't watched the full show, but this is what the advert kind of implies. When these two young people can't pay their rent, they start entering, the sex work industry. Now, that's exactly what the cartel wants to prime your kids to think, that this is a natural choice and it would be fair enough. Now, I'm not smearing sex workers, because heck knows they have had a tough, a hard enough life as it is. This is not what it's about. What I'm about is pulling people out of sex work, turning them into self-employed people and entrepreneurs, instead of working for the crime cartel. Because you have to know that the sex industry is owned wholesale by the organized crime cartel. Their staple businesses, as I said in my tweets, are sex work, drugs, and murder. Okay, that is the staple business that this entire crime cartel started with. That's the staple business of the Italian mafia, right? That was the staple business of the Chicago mob, right? And that is the staple business of this global crime cartel. It is also the staple business of the intelligence agencies. The CIA has been shown to be the, cocaine import agency, right? MI5 and MI6 have been shown to be involved in the child trafficking industry, having certain, children's homes where they use the children and farm them out to politicians, right? Senior heads of MI5 and MI6 have been caught to be involved, all this sort of stuff. So the cartel's staple business is the sex industry, its drugs, and its murder. Now, when you see Bonding, this new Netflix series, being sold to your children, you have to know that it is about breaking up your family. It's about bypassing parental supervision. That's why they said, quick tip, don't watch this with your parents. They guide your children what to do, okay? And you have to realize that they will put their cartel logo already into the title. That's why the I is lowercase. There's no other reason why the I would be lowercase. Do you understand? Now, remember that the entire program, the entire 20th century program was, after the Second World War, it was about breaking up the family unit, because that was the last frontier. They wanted to break parents from their children. This is why the family courts are, human trafficking operations. They want to separate the children from the parents and put them into child homes, because that's where you can sex traffic them. I think 87% of all the child sex slaves came from children's homes, right? I think that was either a statistic from the US or from the UK. But I think this is the way around it is, right? 87% of all the child sex slaves came from children homes, right? Pretty big deal. I mean, for me as a systems analyst, I conclude that children homes are sex trafficking systems, right? They churn out sex trafficked kids. So this is what it's about. That's why the family courts are such, criminal operations. They want to take away the children from the parents on the whimsiest of reasons, right? For the whimsiest of reasons. They want to also break up marriages. That's why it's so easy to divorce, right? And they want to have lots of lone single parents who are so overworked that they will put their kids in front of the television where the cartel can take over parenting. The cartel has, can fill their little brains because it has the majority of programming time. In the olden days, when kids came home from school, they would be at home, grandma would be there, grandpa would be there, parents would be there. A kid couldn't run around a home without having some parents somewhere. When the kids went outside to play with other children, they were surrounded by other children. It is pretty unprecedented, and this just started in the second half of the 20th century, that you will have children being brought up entirely on the, fare that they get from not even the government, but this massive cartel, right? So if you clock up the number of hours of stuff going into a child's brain these days, for the first time in history, the vast majority is coming from companies and the government, from, government broadcasters and private broadcasters. Big fucking deal, okay? And this change didn't happen overnight. It was a careful project, because if you took a parent from the late 19th century or early 20th century and you said, you have to, give us your children, you have to put your children in front of this box, you have no control what they're shown, and they will be sitting in front of that box. These days it could be a laptop, it could be a TV, right? And you will have no control over that, and they will be watching that typically for 6 hours per day. These parents would say, you know what, I think we're off to court and we'll sue your ass for taking away our parental rights and for taking our children. Now, it was a big leap, okay? So there were a lot of abusers who had to be employed to bring about this change, where suddenly Netflix can come out and in a tweet, note that, your kids might be subscribed to the Twitter feed, you might not be. Perhaps it's time you subscribe to the Twitter feed and make your kids unfollow Netflix, right? So now, for the first time in history, you have a private corporation say to the kids, hey kids, quick tip, don't watch this when your parents are around. This is a secret between you and us. Now, there's a precedent for this, for a private company having, a personal thing between the child and them. And that was the child abuse in Hollywood, right? Hollywood producers and Hollywood big businessmen would say to the children, hey, don't tell your parents about this. Don't listen to your parents. Listen to us. We'll make you rich and famous, right? And there's actually one Hollywood child star who had the courage, and bless him for that, thank him for that he actually went public. And he said, that's exactly what I was told. Don't listen to your parents, listen to us, right? That's how it's done. But now what has been done to the child stars in Hollywood, who then ended up being child sex slaves, is now being done to your children. And the reason why they want your children to be child sex slaves is because this massive cartel keeps expanding. The sex trade is one of their staple businesses, and they need fresh meat every year. So if they want to be expanding, they need fresh child prostitutes every year. And they have now farmed the market, right? They have absolutely groomed everybody who was out and about and free, children without parents, children from children's homes. And now they're going after your children. Because in their mind, you don't feature as a parent because you're working your ass off, working 2 or 3 jobs at a time, trying to make ends meet, both you and your wife, who might not even be your wife, but your third partner, and your kids might be from 4 different partnerships, not even marriages. That's perfect for cartel, because no one even remembers whose fucking kids these are, where the hell these kids came from, and no one knows where the kids are and what the fuck they're watching, right? That's now the stage today. If I asked you what was your kid watching today, you will have no fucking clue. I can guarantee you have no idea what your kid was watching on its mobile phone. You have no idea what your kid was watching on the laptop, and you don't even have a clue what the kid was watching on the television. Chances are the kid has his or her own television in her bedroom, right? You just managed to fuck yourself, right? You totally fucked yourself and your children. And if you need any more evidence, have a look at the new Netflix series called Bonding and see how there the cartel's putting out brainwash that it's totally okay if you can't pay your tuition fees, which, by the way, the cartel increased artificially to put your kids into debt so that they can work in the sex industry, which is where the cartel makes its money. The cartel doesn't really make money off the student loans, 50% of which are not paid back. The cartel makes money off child prostitutes, 100% of whom get paid, right? Because those customers who don't get paid, well, they will deal with be dealt with by the pimp. So do you see the conduit here? So the student loans, not big profit margin. University students in sex work trying to pay student loans, massive margins, okay? And that's where your kids are heading. So if you let your kids watch Bonding, or maybe if it's too late and they already watched it, when you were out at work, be absolutely sure you sit down with them over dinner and you make it clear that it doesn't matter how hard mommy and daddy are working right now to make ends meet, if they ever get into monetary problems at university, they must never, ever enter sex work. You know, S&M bondage dungeons are not really what they're sexed up to be in this series, you know. So, and you have to make it very clear, because there are a few people who make a stupendous amount of money with sex work, and they are floated on YouTube, and they're saying how amazing life is and how rich you can get by just filming your boobs for customers over Skype and stuff like that. And this is not how it works. And the reason why it's not how it works is that once you enter the system, you become the property of the crime cartel. They will have mapped your potential as a sex worker, and they will continue, but they will want to continue to make money off you and your children, you know. And if you're a good-looking woman, they will try to pair you up with a cartel stud to have good-looking children, and they would want to traffic your children too, because to them, you're just, you know, cattle that's calving. They would want to make money off the cattle and the calves, okay? That's why you should never get into the sex industry. And that's why also, by the way, you should tell your children never to take drugs. Not because, you know, you want them to be boring, or not because you don't want them to experiment, but because as soon as they buy drugs, they will become customers, paying customers of the intelligence agencies, who will then track them for life. They'll become paying customers of the crime cartel, and the crime cartel wants to keep customers, right? If your kids ever want to enter some sort of drug with, you know, treatment or drug withdrawal program, the cartel will make sure that they will fall back later, because the cartel wants them back as customers. Okay, that's why you have to tell your children, if you buy drugs at university, even if it's just weed, be aware that this weed will have been brought to you by the CIA, who had to pay a fuckload of money to transport it to you from wherever the hell they get it from, Ecuador, or I don't know what, Paraguay, right? Or just down the road, farm it down the road. But they would want to have that money back. And the little bit you pay them for the marijuana is not going to be quite enough for the import, you know, costs. So they will make it their money back off you, of brain chipping you, of using you for human experimentation during your undergraduate studies, blah, 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 right? They will want to make more money off you than it cost them to import the weed and the cocaine and the LSD and all the funky stuff that you might get at university. They will get their cash back and a profit margin on top of that. And if they can't get it off you, they'll get it off your children. Okay, so enough. I've preached enough. So, you know, if you're an adult, you know to go out and have a look at, you know, this Netflix series, right? And just look at how young these teenagers are. And remember, right? Yeah, don't fall into the trap of, you know, dreaming about these actors and how sexy they look, right? Remember that these could be, and these will be, your children. Okay, so if you get off on watching that, well, you are getting off on having your children raped, right? So watch it and be very, very aware that this is serious, and be very aware that millions of children will watch this. Millions. Okay, and then if you're a concerned parent, you know, you should also, first of all, get rid of Netflix, because on there, kids can stream anything. They can stream The Purge, they can stream bonding, you know, sex work advertising. But then also think if maybe a group of parents who really had enough of this shit could possibly get together and use their, you know, middle-class, high-paying income to pay for one kick-ass lawyer to sue the pants off Netflix for putting out that shit, because it actually amounts to high treason. You know, the philosopher Socrates was in the end, I think, charged by perverting the minds of youth. I think that's how they took him down, okay? He was teaching young Greek men, I think it was mostly men. The guy was also gay, by the way. But anyway, so he was teaching all these young, handsome Greek lads how to think for themselves. And for the Greek overlords back then, that was like fucking kryptonite. They couldn't handle it. So they took the guy down. They poisoned him. They forced him to drink a poisoned chalice. But I think the charge against him was perverting the minds of the young. Okay, back then it was with thinking. Now, these days, it's with fucking sex work, drugs, and genocide. Okay? So this is perverting the minds of young people. All right? And I really think that, you know, this type of charge stood back in the days of Socrates for a reason, because parents were concerned about what's being done to their young kids. Right? You need to be just as concerned. You shouldn't, you know, kill the Socrates equivalent these days. You need to take down fucking Netflix. Okay? They are abusers. They are abusers. And they keep revealing themselves as abusers. If you just scroll through the front page of Netflix, you will find, you know, advertisements for the occult, for secret societies, for clandestine murder, for ritual human sacrifice, for genocide, the purge, right? For sex work, how cool sex work is, and all this sort of stuff. And be aware that the source of all this is the same global corporation who makes money with sex work, right? With drugs and with murder. And you can see it right there on Netflix. So, you know what to do. You know that you need to email the chief editor-in-chief of the Chicago Sun-Times. You need to email Neil Steinberg. You should email Dr. LaPorte and just say, what the fuck? My kids most certainly are not going to the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. But, oh, by the way, you could also just, you know, question university what the fuck this is about, right? I mean, if sorry to go on about this guy, but as an academic, he really pissed me the fuck off, because he basically smeared me. I'm a targeted individual, and the guy just smeared me publicly as delusional, right? So in return, I would like to ask the question, if Dr. David LaPorte has to, what did he call it? He has to ask the permission of the, what was it? Some sort of academic review board, right? To be given permission to collect facts, right? Perhaps that academic review board could be asked if, you know, their researchers shouldn't be instead asking for permission before putting out public so-called expert testimonies before actually having looked at any of the evidence, right? Because I don't know, but at Ivy League universities like Oxford, which has many faults, and I know about those, but this kind of shit is something that we can't really pull at Oxford, right? Every single time I saw my colleagues, you know, give interviews, because we did have them at St. John's College. My former boss used to be interviewed, you know, all the time about particle physics. Every single time he said that, he had taught particle physics, he had researched particle physics. That had been his life for the last 30 years. He had all the evidence to back up every sentence that came out of his mouth, right? I don't know of a single colleague who would have gone and given an interview about stuff he never looked into, but he was sure it was this way or that way. Whoa. So please, if you're an academic, you know, ask the university and that research review board what the fuck they're thinking. You know, ask Netflix what the fuck they're thinking. Ask the regulators of the film industry and maybe your government regulators of what gets pumped into children's homes and, you know, the age rating on these things. Ask them what the fuck they're thinking. And remember the really wise words of my great uncle. There's no reason to react emotionally. You just have to sue the fuckers. Right? So I'll leave you with this. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for having lasted this long. I hope I made it worth your while. And thank you. I hope you had a good Easter. And bye for now.